Episode 1. Machobana ka Mangete, the bloodline of chiefs. A precarious existence defines Chief Machobana's world in the late 1700s, caught between powerful kingdoms and internal family strife. Machobana's lineage and complex relationships set the stage for a birth of profound significance. The late 1700s was a time of dramatic change and intense power struggles in the northeastern reaches of what is now KwaZulu-Natal. Across this fertile landscape, smaller clans navigated a complex and often dangerous world shaped by the ambitions of rising kingdoms. Our story begins here, focusing first on the northern Kumalo clan and a man called Machobana ka Mangete. The Kumalo occupied a delicate position in this regional hierarchy. They were vassals, pledged in allegiance to a formidable neighbour, the powerful Ndwandwe kingdom, ruled by King Zwide. But this wasn't just a political arrangement, it was sealed with blood. Through marriage, Machobana had taken as his principal wife Nompetu Kumalo, King Zwide's own daughter, an alliance designed to bind their houses together. Machobana's path to leadership wasn't without its own internal struggles within the Kumalo house. To understand his position, we must look back a generation, to his father, Mangete. Mangete had several sons, including the three eldest, Magawosa, Gasa, and Machobana. Gasa's sons included Donda, Magugu, and Siwela. It was Magugu, as the heir, who ruled the Kumalos from Unkutu. Meanwhile, Mangete's other son, Magawosa, had a son named Beje, who held sway over Kumalo kin at Ngome region. Growing disputes and concerns with Magugu's rule at Unkutu stirred discontent. This tension eventually led to a significant movement. Some of the Kumalo people, under the leadership of Beje, Donda, Gasa's son, and their uncle Machobana, decided to leave Unkutu and seek a new home in the Ngome region. Upon reaching Ngome, these migrating Kumalos settled in distinct areas. Beje established himself near the Ngome River. Donda settled by the Sikwebezi River, earning him the descriptive name Donda Weziziba, he who dwells by the river waters. Machobana chose to settle at Ndinaneni, close to the Mkuze River, also within the Ngome region. Donda and his uncle Machobana forged a particularly close bond, their fates becoming intertwined. While the Kumalos under Magugu remained at Unkutu, these houses led by Machobana, Beje and Donda thrived in the various areas around Ngome region, between the Sikwebezi and Mkuze rivers. The Kumalo house was extensive, including other sons, and importantly, daughters were born into the family as well, individuals who would play vital roles in shaping the family's destiny and, later, the emerging nation. Machobana himself was the son of Mangete, also known as Zikoda, whose lineage stretched back through generations. Mangete, son of Ngululu, also known as Mkachwa, son of Langa, son of Zimangehla, son of Sombangehla, son of Ndaba, the very son of Kumalo, the clan's founder. Kumalo's own ancestry is traced to Mutungwa, son of Ndabedzita, son of Musi, son of Mplanga. This deep history rooted their claim to the land and their identity. Traditionally, Mutungwa had an older brother who had a son named Machichi, who was the heir apparent to the chieftaincy. However, fate intervened. The chieftaincy passed to the younger son, Mutungwa. Mutungwa's ascension, though necessary, was not universally accepted. Those loyal to Machichi's line disputed his claim. Their resentment is captured in a poignant family name that emerged from this time, Ndwandwe, meaning their anger. It speaks to the lasting feeling of grievance that Matshichi had not assumed the chieftaincy despite his position as the rightful heir. Machobana's settlement at Ndinaneni placed him in a strategically important yet potentially dangerous frontier. It was fertile land, but it lay close to the rising power of the Ndwandwe kingdom, ruled by the ambitious King Zwide Kalanga. Zwide was known for his ruthlessness and political acumen, and beside him stood his mother, Queen Ntombazi, a figure remembered not only for her political influence, but also for whispered tales of spiritual power and even darker practices. It was into this sphere of formidable power that Machobana stepped through his marriage to Nompetu Kumalo. While primarily a political alliance, this union had profound consequences, for it laid the foundation for the birth of a child whose legacy would eventually overshadow both his father and his grandfather, Zwide. In accordance with custom, Nompetu did not come to the Kumalo household alone. She was accompanied by close kin from the Ndwandwe kingdom, a practice intended to strengthen the bonds between these powerful houses. Among those who journeyed with Nompetu was Tsikose Ndiweni. Tsikose was a princess of the Amangwe clan, who were under Ndwandwe authority. Oral accounts from the Amandebele suggest that Tsikose may have accompanied Nompetu not just as a companion, but potentially as an umtanyelo, a customary surrogate or companion wife. She was the daughter of Mukeswa Kandlovu, a ruler of the Amangwe people from whom the Ndiweni clan originates. Machobana's settlement at Ndinaneni was a place of both prosperity and peril, caught between loyalty to his father-in-law Zwide and the growing regional tensions. But it was here, by the Mkuze River, near the mountains of Ngome, that a legend was born. Legend tells of a fateful day. Chief Machobana was out hunting when he came upon a fierce leopard. A brutal struggle followed, and though Machobana survived, he was left bloodied and torn. As he returned, wounded but upright, a young warrior rushed to him with news. The warrior, panting and urgent, called out, "Chief, Chief Machobana, I bring good news. A son is born to your house today." Machobana, though bleeding and strained from the fight, responded steadily, perhaps gesturing to his wounds. "Then he is born of blood and breath. Name him for this moment Mzilikazi, the trail of my blood." The trail of his own blood, it is said, became the inspiration for his son's name, Mzilikazi, Lika Machobana, the trail of blood of Machobana. This powerful name would later be shortened to Mzilikazi. Thus began the life of one who would cross rivers, defy kings, and build his own formidable kingdom.
Episode 2. Kingdoms in the Shadow. In the shadow of which Mzilikazi was born stood the Ndwandwe kingdom, a formidable power in the northeast, ruled with an iron hand by King Zwide Kalanga. But Zwide's authority was magnified by the figure who stood beside him, his mother, Queen Ntombazi. Ntombazi is remembered in both oral and written histories as far more than just a royal matriarch. She was a force unto herself, a woman of spiritual authority whose name became associated with whispered tales of supernatural power and even witchcraft. Accounts speak of Ntombazi's alleged rain-making abilities, and, more chillingly, of the ritual practice of beheading rival chiefs and using their skulls in ceremonies believed to enhance her influence and that of her son. Through Queen Ntombazi, Zwide's rule extended beyond the visible world of politics and warfare into the unseen realm of spiritual power. This fusion of military might and mystical influence made resistance to Ndwandwe rule a truly terrifying proposition. It was within this intense environment, charged with both military strength and mystical influence, that the young Mzilikazi grew up. Raised in the Ngome region, near the very borders of the Ndwandwe kingdom, and under the watchful, powerful eye of his grandfather, Zwide. Mzilikazi's early life was a crucial education. He was exposed to the complexities of statecraft, the strict rituals of court, and the ever-present specter of conflict. By blood, Mzilikazi had a foot in two worlds. He was Kumalo, tied to his father's ancestral line, and he was Ndwandwe, connected to the powerful, ruthless dominion of Zwide. This dual identity would shape his perspective and his destiny. In a quiet moment, Machobana offered his young son counsel. Quietly and seriously, he instructed, "Watch them closely, son. Learn not only what men say, but what they hide." Young Mzilikazi, looking towards the distance, asked, "Even the king?" Machobana responded with a resolute nod, "Especially the king." But the Ndwandwe were not the only power shaping the region. To the south, another great kingdom was steadily rising, one that would eventually challenge Zwide's dominance, the Matetwa kingdom, led by the enigmatic and deeply resourceful Dingiswayo. Dingiswayo, born Godongwana, was a prince of the Matetwa royal line. But like many leaders forged in the fires of change, his path to the throne was marked by profound hardship and exile. Oral tradition recounts that his father, King Jabe, fearing plots for succession, ordered the execution of his sons. Godongwana narrowly escaped, wounded. Legend says he carried a spear lodged in his back, and was forced to wander the remote territories under a new name, Dingiswayo, meaning the wanderer, or the troubled one. He found refuge among the Amahlubi people under King Pungane Kansele. There, Dingiswayo did more than just heal. He learned diplomacy, observed different forms of warfare, and sharpened his strategic mind. When King Jabe died, emissaries sought out the exiled prince. Dingiswayo returned, not as a fugitive, but as a rightful heir, hardened by experience. He claimed the Mtetwa throne and immediately set about transforming his kingdom, consolidating power and fostering innovation. His court became a magnet for ambitious exiles, forward-thinking individuals, and rising warriors from across the region. And it was to this dynamic, open court that a woman and her son would arrive, seeking refuge. Nandi and Shaka of the Ilanjeni clan. Shaka, born around 1787, was still a young man, roughly 18 years old, when he and his mother Nandi arrived at Dingiswayo's royal residence around 1805. They had been driven from the main Zulu settlement at Nobamba. Although Shaka was King Senzangakona's firstborn son, his mother was not the favored queen, and the complexities of palace politics meant they were never truly accepted. Under Dingiswayo's patronage, Shaka began his extraordinary rise. Dingiswayo, having known exile and rejection himself, saw in the intense young man a reflection of his own difficult journey. Shaka was soon recruited into the Mtetwa military forces. His presence on the training grounds was different, marked by an intense focus, a quiet discipline, and a fierce determination. Legend has it he once single-handedly slew a terrifying madman who had plagued Mtetwa villages, an act of bravery that earned him the name Ilembe, the Axe. In full, he was known as Ilembe, Eleka, Amanye, Amalembe, Ngoku Kalipa, the axe that surpasses other axes in sharpness. Shaka would not remain an ordinary warrior for long within Dingiswayo's army. He was quickly given command of regiments and began to experiment relentlessly with battlefield tactics, military organization, and rigorous training regimens. It was from these early sparks, fanned by Dingiswayo, that the furnace of Zulu military innovation truly began to burn. While Shaka trained and grew under the mentorship of Dingiswayo, Mzilikazi too continued his education by observation, watching the complex interplay of power, the rise and fall of men around Zwide's court. The rivalry between Zwide and Dingiswayo was steadily intensifying, fueled in part by strategic geography. Zwide's proximity to the East Coast ports allowed him to control lucrative trade routes frequented by Portuguese merchants, a monopoly that became a significant source of tension between the two powerful kingdoms. Zwide, fearing the erosion of his authority and seeking greater control, began asserting his dominance through increasingly aggressive military campaigns. Dingiswayo, though often more subtle in his methods, building alliances and fostering internal strength, also recognized that a direct confrontation was likely inevitable. During a military review, Dingiswayo observed Shaka closely, telling him, "Your eyes are not those of a warrior, Shaka. They are those of a king." Shaka responded, his voice firm and focused. "I do not seek a crown, only a spear, and those who would follow it." And so, the region stood poised on a knife's edge. Two powerful men, Zwide of the Ndwandwe and Dingiswayo of the Mtetwa, were locked in a rivalry that extended beyond mere territory or cattle. Their ambitions were about shaping the very future and order of southeastern Africa, and in the shadow of each leader, two younger men were watching, learning, waiting. One, Shaka, was already forging his path through ruthless discipline and open defiance of old ways. The other, Mzilikazi, stood at the edge of greatness, still known primarily as a Kumalo prince, son of a lineage threatened by the very kingdom his mother's family belonged to. Mzilikazi's destiny was soon to break free from the powerful, dangerous shadow of his grandfather, Zwide. The stage was set for a collision of empires and the violent unraveling of loyalty. Episode 3, Ruin and Rebellion. The storm that had been gathering on the horizon now broke with brutal force. In the highlands of Ngome, where Mzilikazi and his kin had sought a new home, a dark unease settled over the valleys. The escalating rivalry between King Zwide of the Ndwandwe and Dingiswayo of the Matetwa was no longer a distant conflict. It was now bleeding into every corner of the region, including the lands of the Kumalo. For Chief Machobana, the danger did not come from a far-off battlefield, but from within his own complex family ties, and specifically from the man he called father-in-law, King Zwide. Zwide's network of spies and informants was absolute. Nothing within his kingdom went unnoticed. And when word reached him that Matetwa patrols had entered Ngome territory and, critically, had not been challenged or reported by the Kumalos, Zwide saw not a lapse in vigilance, but outright treason. "My king, the reports are confirmed. The Kumalos did nothing. The Matetwa scouts passed through their lands unhindered," said Zwide's advisor. Zwide replied, "Nothing? In my land, advisor, nothing is louder than silence. Machobana has made his choice." Ntombazi, with a quiet but cutting voice, added to Zwide's words, "He forgets the price of divided loyalties. Remind him." Zwide's vengeance was swift and brutal. Without a formal trial, without ceremony, Chief Machobana and his closest attendants were seized. Their lives were ended. The shock of this execution reverberated not only through the Kumalo lands in Ngome territory, but across the entire region. This was far more than just a punishment for perceived disloyalty. It was a chilling message sent by Zwide to all who might consider defying him. And within that brutal message lay a profound betrayal that tore at the heart of Mzilikazi's identity. Zwide was not only his powerful grandfather, the man he had grown up observing, but now he was the killer of his father. The Kumalo kraal at Ndwandwe plunged into deep mourning. Elders gathered, debating frantically what course of action they could possibly take. But the once relatively united clan was now fractured, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. An elder Kumalo, voice weary but firm, added, "We cannot remain here. The river now flows with the blood of chiefs. We must choose, kneel to the king, or rise and forge our own destiny." While the Kumalos reeled from the shock of Machobana's death, another thread of the region's story was violently unraveling to the south. Dingiswayo, the resourceful leader of the Matetwa, was captured during a military campaign against an allied chief, Mzilikazi of the Kwabe. Some accounts suggest treachery by the allied chief played a role. Zwide's forces quickly brought their high-profile prisoner to the heart of the Ndwandwe capital. The end came swiftly for Dingiswayo. Some chilling accounts claim Queen Ntombazi insisted the Matetwa king be brought before her, that she looked into his eyes before she gave a silent nod for his execution. Whatever the precise circumstances, Dingiswayo was killed by the Ndwandwe. In the short span of just a few months, two significant leaders, the subtle, strategic Dingiswayo and the Kumalo chief Machobana, had been slain by order of Zwide Kalanga. The Ndwandwe king's power seemed absolute, and yet one man who served Dingiswayo, a rising figure many expected Zwide to target next, still eluded him. Shaka, the rising Zulu general, shaped by Dingiswayo's mentorship, survived the fall of his master thanks to a desperate act of loyalty and foresight. Ndwandwe, nephew of Machobana and cousin to Mzilikazi, He who dwells by the river waters had watched Zwede's power grow and witnessed his uncle's brutal end. He grew increasingly wary of Zwede's tightening, lethal grip. Seeing what had happened to Machobana, Ndwandwe rightly feared that Shaka, who had shown such remarkable promise under Dingiswayo, would be the next target. Risking everything, Ndwandwe sent a secret, urgent message to Shaka, warning him of Dingiswayo's death and the imminent danger now closing in. That crucial warning gave Shaka the vital time he needed to escape the immediate reach of the Ndwandwe and regroup his forces. But when Zwide inevitably discovered Ndwandwe's act of defiance, his fury was swift and absolute. Ndwandwe was executed, just as his uncle Machobana had been. His loyalty cost him his life. It is believed that Ndwandwe had offered some advice to Mzilikazi, perhaps knowing that the inevitable was coming. Ndwandwe said to Mzilikazi, "The fire that killed your father still burns, Mzilikazi, but if we carry his ashes in silence, it will consume us too." Ndwandwe continued, "Go to Shaka. He has lost his master. You have lost your father. Perhaps together you can forge something greater from these ashes." Mzilikazi, with a low and heavy voice, responded, "And what of Zwide?" Ndwandwe remarked, "Zwide has chosen his legacy, etched in blood. Now, my cousin, choose yours." Of the key Kumalo chiefs, only Peje, who had settled by the Ngome River, managed to survive Zwide's brutal purge. In the aftermath of Machobana and Ndwandwe's execution by Zwide, the Kumalos at Ngome needed a new leader. Of the sons of Machobana, Ndwangubana was born of the principal wife, Nompetu Nexumalo, King Zwide's daughter. As the son of the senior wife, tradition and expectation placed the mantle of leadership upon his young shoulders. Yet the Kumalo elders, their gaze fixed on the turbulent horizon and the looming shadow of Shaka, harbored reservations. They perceived in Ndwangubana a leader ill-equipped to navigate the treacherous political landscape. There was likely great mistrust in the closer Nexumalo connection of Ndwangubana, given that Machobana had fallen under the hand of Zwide. Under these circumstances, the preference of the Kumalos gravitated towards Mzilikazi, the other son of Machobana. Mzilikazi was seen as having a resolve better forged for the trials ahead. Ultimately, the elders' judgment saw the emergence of Mzilikazi as the heir to Machobana. For Mzilikazi, now a man in his late 20s, the crossroads was stark and unavoidable. Zwide's throne, once a source of protection and power, had become a threat to his kin. He could not remain in Ngome under Zwide's rule. He would not serve the man who had taken everything from him. And so, Mzilikazi made his defining decision. He defected. He gathered a core group of loyal followers and traveled south, across increasingly dangerous terrain, seeking out the warrior general who had also lost his mentor to Zwide, Shaka Kasenzangakona, now poised to inherit the Mtetwa legacy and build his own. Shaka, with a direct, assessing voice, asked, "You were forged in his house. What brings you to mine?" Mzilikazi, with a firm voice carrying the weight of his loss, responded, "He forged the knife, then used it to kill my blood." Shaka, after a long, weighted silence, a flicker of recognition, said, "Then we have both lost fathers. Let us see what sons can build from what was broken." Shaka welcomed Mzilikazi, not just as a strategic recruit, but as a recognition of shared pain, shared exile, and mutual potential. Shaka knew the value Mzilikazi brought. intimate tactical knowledge of the Ndwandwe, the discipline of a chief's son, and the fierce fire of a man who had nothing left to lose but his future. Mzilikazi was swiftly incorporated into the burgeoning Zulu military structure. He trained under Shaka's rapidly evolving system, mastering the close-quarters combat of the Ikowa and the complex movements of the regiments. He rose rapidly through the ranks. For a time, their alliance was powerful, seemingly unbreakable, but as history would soon show, two stars born of such intensity rarely shine forever in the same sky. And so, the son of Machobana stood reborn, not as a vassal of Zwide, not as a relic of a shattered past, but as a formidable warrior aligned with the future. In fire and blood, Mzilikazi had made his choice, and that choice would forever change things. Episode 4: Warfare and Warnings. By the year 1818, the region of southeastern Africa was not just experiencing conflict. It was undergoing a fundamental transformation. The death of Dingiswayo had not extinguished the Mtetwa Confederation as Zwide might have hoped. Instead, it had unleashed its most potent weapon. Shaka Kasenzanga Kona, the intensely ambitious Zulu general forged under Dingiswayo's mentorship, rose rapidly to fill the vacuum. Now, in his early 30s, Shaka swiftly assumed control of the Mtetwa coalition and began a radical process, consolidating the disparate Nguni-speaking clans and conquered groups into a single, unified, and fiercely disciplined military force. The Zulu kingdom, as history would remember it, had just been born, not through slow diplomacy or inherited rights, but through sheer force of will, innovative structure, and the brutal efficiency of steel. And in the heart of this newly forged power stood Mzilikazi, still grieving the murders of his father, Machobana, and his cousin Ndwandwe. He now served under the command of the man who was fast becoming the most feared leader in the land. The Kumalo prince, seasoned by his upbringing near Zwide's court and his own experiences, adapted quickly to the rigorous new Zulu military system, earning his place as a trusted lieutenant. Shaka was more than just a formidable warrior. He was a military revolutionary. Under his leadership, the Zulu army underwent a radical transformation that changed the face of warfare in the region. Traditional long-throwing spears, effective for skirmishing, were largely replaced by the short, heavy stabbing spear, the Ikowa. Designed for brutal close combat, it demanded courage and brought battles to a swift, deadly conclusion. The large cowhide shield was reimagined, used not merely for passive defense, but as an active tool to hook and unbalance enemies, leaving them vulnerable. Shaka developed the iconic buffalo horn formation, a brilliant tactical innovation. Regiments were divided into 3 parts: the central chest to engage the enemy head-on, the flanking horns to rapidly encircle and trap them, and the loins, a powerful reserve held back to exploit weaknesses or reinforce the attack. Mzilikazi, voice sharp, instructive. You fight like a man in two minds. Your spear hesitates. Young warrior, because I fear the man in front of me, commander. Mzilikazi, stepping closer, intense. Then fear the man behind you more, for he carries your shame if you fall. Fight as one, or you fight alone. The stage was set for the first major confrontation. In 1818, the armies of Shaka and Zwida met near Gokli Hill. Zwida's Ndwandwe army, by traditional counts, significantly outnumbered the Zulu force. By conventional military logic of the time, the outcome should have been inevitable. But Shaka did not fight with conventional logic. He used the terrain to his advantage, luring the Ndwandwe into attacking uphill, forcing them to exhaust themselves as they climbed the slopes of Gokli Hill. Then, executing the devastating buffalo horn formation, his flanking regiments encircled and trapped the larger Ndwandwe force. The Zulu forces emerged victorious. It was a stunning upset, the first clear sign that Shaka's radical methods and the effectiveness of his commanders like Mzilikazi were fundamentally reshaping the battlefield dynamics of the region. Shaka, voice thoughtful, studying the bloodied field. They outnumbered us significantly. Mzilikazi, voice calm, strategic. But they did not outthink us, my king. Shaka, smiling faintly, acknowledging the contribution. No, nor outrun your flank, Mzilikazi. The victory at Gokli Hill was a significant blow to Zwida, but the war was far from over. In 1820, determined to crush this upstart Zulu kingdom and reclaim his dominance, Zwida launched a massive expedition. The decisive battle took place near the Mlatuze River. As the vast Ndwandwe army began crossing the river, Shaka's forces struck with precise timing and overwhelming force. Many Ndwandwe warriors were caught mid-crossing, trapped between the water and the relentless Zulu attack. The result was catastrophic for Zwida. This battle broke the back of the Ndwandwe army. Some say it also broke Zwida's will. What followed was the rapid fragmentation of his once mighty kingdom, with their forces shattered and their capital vulnerable or ransacked. Zwida's power base collapsed entirely. Many of Zwida's senior generals, seeing their kingdom crumble, fled northward, taking with them the remnants of their regiments and loyal followers. Soshangane Kazikode fled eastward, eventually establishing the powerful Gaza Empire in present-day Mozambique. Another leader, Zwangandaba, moved north, crossing rivers and mountains before founding settlements in areas that are now part of modern-day Malawi and Tanzania. Others, like Mpazeni, would later settle into parts of Zambia. The Ndwandwe, once a monolithic force under Zwida, had become a diaspora of military exiles, their power scattered across the vast southern African interior. As for Zwida himself, the historical accounts vary. One version states he was captured and executed shortly after his defeat at the Mlatuze. Another holds that he managed to escape with a small group and died in exile near the upper Kamati River around 1825. What is historically certain is this: Zwide Kalanga was no longer a king. His empire was gone, and his legacy was now tied to its scattering. Shaka, voice satisfied, looking ahead. The elephant is fallen. Its tusks belong to us now. Commander, perhaps Madlaka. Then the land is yours, Great One. Your kingdom is unmatched. Shaka, his gaze distant, looking to the horizon. No, The land is ours, and we are not done carving it. Mzilikazi's role in these pivotal victories did not go unnoticed. He had proven himself a master of maneuver, a courageous leader, respected by his fellow warriors and feared by the enemy. As Shaka expanded his dominion and restructured the region, he placed trust in only a few to command his largest, most important regiments, and Mzilikazi was undeniably among this elite circle. But victories and the power they bring can cast long, complex shadows. And in those shadows, the seeds of tension were beginning to take root between the two powerful men. For though Mzilikazi was loyal, forged in the fires of Shaka's army, he was also proud, a chief's son in his own right. And in the volatile world of power, pride often grows faster than trust. That tension, a quiet warning beneath the surface of their shared triumphs, would surface soon. But for now, the alliance stood, forged in mutual need and victory. Two warriors, Shaka the king, the architect of a new era, and Mzilikazi the commander, a key instrument of his power, had broken the back of an old kingdom. But the story of their brotherhood was already starting to crack. Episode 5. The Spoils of Ranisi. Mzilikazi Kamachobana stood at the height of his power within the burgeoning Zulu kingdom. He was one of Shaka's most capable, respected, and celebrated military commanders. He had proven his courage and tactical brilliance on the battlefields of Gokli Hill and the Mlathuza River, helping to bring the mighty Ndwandwe kingdom to its knees. But even loyalty forged in shared victory has its limits when ambition and pride collide. Beyond the core territories of the Zulu kingdom, in the highlands of what is today South Africa's Free State, in a region known as Ndwandwe, a Soto chief named Ranisi had become increasingly bold. His people, nestled amongst the mountains, had developed a formidable defense. When threatened, they would retreat high up the slopes and unleash massive boulders, raining them down upon any invaders below. Shaka, ever eager to test his forces and project Zulu power beyond the lowlands, saw Ranisi as both an opportunity and perhaps a test for one of his commanders. He dispatched Mzilikazi to lead a raid against Ranisi. But there was a significant twist to this assignment. Shaka gave Mzilikazi a regiment that, by Zulu standards, was considered weak, composed mainly of older warriors, perhaps not the elite fighters Mzilikazi was accustomed to leading. Some historical accounts suggest this was no oversight, but a deliberate, calculated move by Shaka. He may have intended for Mzilikazi to fail, or at least to struggle, a subtle way to humble his increasingly prominent commander and remind him of the hierarchy. Mzilikazi, shrewd and experienced, understood the implied risks and the potential setup. He studied the challenging mountain terrain and the Soto's deadly defense tactic. He knew that a frontal assault up the slopes would be suicidal with the force he had been given. Instead of pursuing Ranisi's people into the deadly mountain traps, Mzilikazi devised a different plan. He would not fight for blood on the treacherous slopes. He would plunder the wealth below. Mzilikazi said, "They wait on the cliffs, ready to crush us with stone. Let them wait there with the wind." He continued, "We are not here for a fight we cannot win. We are here for wealth." A captain asked, "And what of King Shaka's precise orders, Commander?" Mzilikazi replied, his voice firm, "Shaka sent me to bring spoils. I shall return with spoils. The how is mine to decide." Mzilikazi's strategy worked. His forces captured the cattle and other wealth from the valleys, carefully avoiding the Soto's deadly mountain trap. The mission was a success, a testament to Mzilikazi's tactical brilliance, but it was achieved on his terms, not strictly by the method Shaka might have intended. Among the cattle taken was a particularly unique and prized breed, the Ibidi, a three-colored cow, unlike any found in Zululand. In Nguni society, cattle were symbols of status, wealth, power, and the traditional form of tribute owed to a king. Ancient custom required that a commander returning from a raid must present the spoils of war before the king, who would then redistribute them, keeping the largest and finest share for himself. But instead of surrendering all the captured wealth, Mzilikazi made a decision that would irrevocably alter his fate. He kept a significant portion for himself, including the prized Ibidi cattle. When Shaka's envoys, his Osibalukulu, the king's trusted chief messengers, arrived at Mzilikazi's base in Ngome to collect the spoils, they received only a token offering, a fraction of what Mzilikazi had actually taken. Mzilikazi said with quiet defiance, "Take this to the king. If he believes I have withheld more, he is welcome to come to Ngome and see for himself." The messengers returned to Shaka at his royal residence, Kwabulawayo, with news of Mzilikazi's blatant defiance and the meager spoils. Shaka, the king who demanded absolute obedience, was insulted. Yet his initial response was not outright fury, but a coldly calculated, deeply symbolic gesture. Instead of sending warriors, Shaka sent Mzilikazi a single object, the hind leg of a cow. In Nguni culture, the hind leg of a cow was traditionally meat reserved for women. Sending it to a male commander was a profound act of mockery. To Mzilikazi, a proud chief's son and accomplished commander, it was, in his eyes, a declaration of war disguised as contempt. Mzilikazi stated, "So, this is what the king truly thinks of me." He continued, "I have fed his warriors, buried kings for him, and led armies to his greatest victories." An advisor asked, "Shall we send a message in return, Commander?" Mzilikazi responded, "No. We respond with silence and preparation." His message was clear. Mine will be clearer still. When the Osibalukulu prepared to depart from Mzilikazi's base, they faced a final open act of defiance. Before they could leave, Mzilikazi's guards cut the feathers from their hair. In Zulu custom, feathered headpieces were reserved for elite warriors and royal envoys, symbols of status and authority. Cutting them was a deeply symbolic ritual stripping, an unmistakable message sent directly to Shaka. "I no longer recognize your authority or grant respect to your representatives." The tension escalated into direct confrontation. Shaka dispatched a military delegation to Ndwandwe, where Mzilikazi was based. Envoys were sent to negotiate, to resolve the matter through talks, but the meetings ended in stalemate. The air thick with unspoken threats and irreconcilable positions. Anticipating Shaka's inevitable military response, Mzilikazi acted swiftly and quietly. He moved his family, his loyal warriors, and his considerable herd of cattle from the base at Ndwandwe. to a more defensible location, Ntubeni, nestled deeper within the rugged, familiar hills of Ngome. Then, the first Zulu regiment arrived. Shaka had dispatched the Izimpolo regiment under the command of Nzobo Kasobandi. The Zulu force expected an easy victory, a swift punishment for a disloyal vassal who had dared to steal from the king. But Mzilikazi's warriors, fewer in number, yes, but fiercely loyal and fighting for their chief and their survival, met the Izimpolo at Ntumbane, and they fought with unexpected ferocity, using their knowledge of the local terrain to their advantage. Against all expectations, the Zulu regiment was defeated, and in that moment of unexpected triumph, Mzilikazi earned a powerful new name, Hlabazulu, he who pierced the Zulu. It was a challenge hurled at the feet of the most powerful king in the region. It was a prophecy of the separation to come. Mzilikazi said to a captain, "He made me strong, did he not? Taught me how to fight, how to lead." He added, "But he did not make me small enough to forget who I am." Mzilikazi stated, "Now he will remember that even a lion's cub has claws and knows how to use them." But such a victory, such a defiance, comes at a steep price. The Zulu king would not suffer this defeat in silence. Shaka's response would be absolute, and Mzilikazi would soon face a far larger, far more determined army, and confront betrayal far closer to home than he could have imagined. Episode 6, The Rise of Hlabazulu. Victory, especially a victory against a king as powerful as Shaka, is a fragile, fleeting crown. After defeating Shaka's first punitive regiment, the Izimpolo at Ntumbane, Mzilikazi Kamachabana stood for a brief moment in rare company. A former commander who had dared to pierce the armor of the Zulu war machine, and succeeded. He had challenged a king and won the first round. But Shaka Kasenzanga Kona was not a king to suffer defiance or defeat twice. The Zulu response to the humiliation at Ntumbane came swiftly and overwhelmingly. A second, much larger and more formidable regiment, the Umbalabele, was immediately dispatched. It was led by Mdlaka Kanchindi, a seasoned and utterly loyal commander, with clear, brutal orders to accomplish what the first force had failed to do: crush Mzilikazi and his rebels completely. What followed at Mzilikazi's new position at Ntubeni, deep within the Ngome Hills, was less a battle and more a reckoning. Mzilikazi's loyal forces fought bravely, defending their chief and their homes. But they were terribly outnumbered, out-equipped by the full might of the Zulu standing army, and ultimately outmaneuvered. He had earned the name Hlabazulu, he who pierced the Zulu in the first clash. But now the Zulu had pierced back, and the wound was fatal. Mzilikazi's army was overrun. But sheer numbers were not the only force that brought Mzilikazi down. According to strong oral traditions and poignant clan praise poems, there was another, more painful element at play: betrayal. Someone close to Mzilikazi, someone who knew his movements, his strategies, and his hiding places, had revealed them to the enemy. That someone, it is said, was his own brother, Zeni, also known as Nzeni. Like many siblings of royal blood in societies where succession and status were fiercely contested, especially those born of different mothers, a simmering mistrust had long existed between Mzilikazi and Zeni. In the cutthroat political world of 19th century Nguni leadership, brothers were often rivals, and, tragically, rivalry could easily turn into bloodshed, or, in this case, ruinous betrayal. It was Zeni who had reportedly first informed Shaka about the cattle Mzilikazi had withheld after the Ranisi campaign, sparking the initial conflict. And now, in Mzilikazi's hour of need, it was Zeni again who provided the critical intelligence to the attacking Zulu regiment, revealing the location of Mzilikazi's secure mountain refuge, Janet Shani, deep in what is now the Abakulusi region. Armed with this knowledge, Shaka's overwhelming forces were able to corner Mzilikazi and break the remaining resistance of his loyal warriors. The battle was lost, and the cost was immeasurable. Amidst the aftermath, Mzilikazi spoke with a Kumalo elder, saying, They knew exactly where to strike, exactly when. The elder, his voice heavy and hesitant, replied, My prince, not all wounds come from spears on the battlefield. Mzilikazi looked away, his voice bitter. Then this one came from my own blood. Defeated in battle, his loyal forces decimated, Mzilikazi was surrounded by the very empire he had once served, now seeking his destruction. For a man of Mzilikazi's pride and standing, who had defied the most powerful king in the land, only one viable option remained. He could not surrender. He could not remain under Shaka's authority. That single, brutal option was exile. But this was no mere retreat into obscurity or hiding. For Mzilikazi, it was a deliberate choice, a decision to leave Zululand not as a fugitive fleeing justice, but as a leader choosing a new destiny for himself and his followers. At this point, Mzilikazi was not yet formally a king, but he was still undeniably a chieftain of the Kumalo people. He had several wives, a core group of utterly loyal followers. In a final council, the spiritual advisor, Gwabalanda Mate, spoke with a solemn voice. We cannot bury our dead here, Mzilikazi. Their bones will speak against us to the one who defeated them. Mzilikazi replied, his voice firm and looking towards the future. Then let their memory fuel our journey. We go, not to run from our past, but to rise towards a future we will build ourselves. The decision was made. Mzilikazi and his relatively small group of loyal followers, the remnants of his military force, his family, and the Kumalo who chose him, gathered their remaining cattle, their weapons, and their possessions. The path ahead was treacherous. They would cross the towering, formidable Drakensberg Mountains, leaving the land of their ancestors, the land that had given him life and inflicted such pain, behind forever. Curiously, the Zulu forces did not pursue them immediately, not with the full might Shaka could command. Perhaps Shaka believed the damage was done, that Mzilikazi was no longer a threat, simply another defeated chieftain. Perhaps he chose, for reasons lost to history, not to chase a man he had once trusted implicitly into the unknown territories beyond his control. Or perhaps Shaka recognized that some destinies, some visions of power must break apart from the source, to fully unfold elsewhere. This pivotal moment marked the true, independent beginning of Mzilikazi's legacy. He had lost his position, his army, and his standing in Zululand. But what he carried with him was something far greater and more enduring. A vision. A vision of a new kingdom, a state forged not through inheritance or political maneuvering, but through fire, resilience, and the gathering of those who, like him, sought a new beginning, a place not inherited from ancestors, but built by survivors. And left behind, etched into the history of Zululand, was the powerful, complex name he had earned, Zulu, the one who pierced the Zulu, a name that was born of defiance, but which would soon become legend as he journeyed into the unknown. Mzilikazi's journey was far from over. The path beyond the mountains was vast, challenging, and filled with both danger and opportunity. He would encounter new peoples, face new enemies, and gather new followers. He would take the lessons learned in Zululand, the military discipline, the organizational skill, the understanding of power, and adapt them. He was leaving behind the shadows of Ndwandwe and Shaka, stepping into the light of his own making. And as he ventured into the interior, the foundation was being laid for the forging of one of Southern Africa's most remarkable kingdoms.